This leader allows the projectionist to complete adjustments before presenting the film. This voice has the same intensity and tone quality as the narration which follows.
You've got what?
How could he do something like that?
He's probably ruined himself for life now.
I hope he didn't tell anyone else. We've got to keep it quiet.
Guess we should take him to the doctor, but let's make sure he doesn't report it.
If he reports it, everyone will know. It's not our fault, is it? Maybe you should try to talk.
I think it's too late. I really should have spoken to him sooner.
You know he never tells us what's on his mind. Never did.
Maybe we just didn't listen.
They're talking about venereal disease. It's not a crime, it's a disease. There are thousands of scared kids like this walking around with VD. If we discuss it openly, we can cure it, even prevent it.
Well, I think we're guilty about anything that involves sexual activities. So I think we were all brought up in a generation where it was difficult to talk about normal sexual affairs, abnormal sexual affairs, surely any disease affecting the sex organs or even the organs themselves. I hope we're coming out of that dark age.
How wide and deep is the gap between generations? Listen to this group of teenagers in an unrehearsed discussion. They and Dr. Chaucer were filmed at different times and edited for this presentation.
So easy. That was really great, you know? Yeah. It's so easy. You see, you always give us an easy test all the time. It's so easy.
Did she tell you what was it would have been?
I don't know. I got that one too.
When is Laura didn't have a
pretty soon.
Today, I'd like to start out by talking about communications among yourselves and your families. And I'd like to throw out a question and see how you react to this. What are some of the differences between the way you would talk with your parents and your friends?
If you tell your friend something and you say you want it confidential, then it'll stay confidential. But not if you tell your parents. And your parents usually don't understand what you mean anyway. Or they'll say, oh, that's not important, but it is. Or to you it is.
If you tell your parents something confidentially, they'll tell it confidentially to their best friend, and they'll do the same, and it's all over town.
It always cocktail parties, you know.
Plus the fact parents don't have the same problems that we have. The kids you can talk to because they're in a lot of the same situations that you are.
Yeah.
You have no trouble, you know, talking to them because they understand you more than your parents.
The things that I go through as a teenager now are not the same things that they went through as a teenager, and they are not able to accept what I'm going through.
One gets syphilis in the same way that one gets gonorrhea, by intimate sex organ contact.
Even if you've got young parents who are like in their 30s, they still were teenagers more than 20 years ago. And
they grew up back, you know, way back in the dark ages.
It was so long ago that, you know, everybody tends to forget.
This has nothing to do with morals. The church and the home can still do their moralizing and should. There are some important moral aspects to this problem, but they don't do anything for the disease problem. Those things can be kept, I think, clearly separate.
They may remember, but it's not the same type of problem. I don't think it's that they've forgotten things. If you're 16 or whatever and you come home with a straight F report card or a pretty poor report card, I mean, they're not going to tell you, well, I had report cards like this. One semester I got 3 Ds. I mean, they're not going to say that. They're going to say, well, why can't you be like me or your father? I got straight A's.
Maybe they didn't. Well,
Maybe
like Joe Schmo down the block who did better.
Yeah,
if they didn't do so well in their childhood, they may not talk about themselves to say, why don't you be like him? He got straight A's.
My grandmother shipped out all my mother's stuff to our house, and I was looking through all the report cards, and she didn't do so hot. I think that some of the things that we go through today, they didn't really, the same situation wouldn't have come up.
Yeah, like sex. Like now, sex is more open today. Back then it wasn't. It was taboo.
A sore on the penis, a rash, a lot of these symptoms, a discharge in a woman particularly, may or may not be venereal. But these are important symptoms, and they've got to be checked. And this is why you can't treat these diseases in the drugstore. You've got to know what you have before you know what to take for it.
If I bring up drugs or alcohol or sex or anything, it's automatically assumed that the reason I'm asking is because I'm doing it. We don't talk about drugs and alcohol that much in the house, but I don't think that if we ever really did get into a really deep discussion, my parents would automatically assume she's, you know, using drugs. I don't think they would.
They seem to think that you're involved with it or that you're getting involved with it. And you can't really discuss it because if they think you're involved in it, they're going to be terribly scared and upset and everything. You can't just discuss it.
They have set morals and set values, and they expect you to take after them. And as soon as you bring up a question like something about drugs or about sex, and it doesn't fit into their morals, you know, they get really upset and they want to know why, and you just end up getting into quite an argument or something.
A lot of times the kids will know more about it, like, say, drugs. The only thing the parents know is what they've been fed by the sheriff's office or something or other, some propaganda. And the kids know, even the kids that aren't involved, know more of what it's about than the parents do. And they know what their parents are going to say, and there's nothing really to discuss.
Well, I'd like to see BD education fitted into a more general program of thorough health and sex education so that it isn't just thrown in cold, but is understood deeply and thoroughly by all kids going through school, and starting at very early ages, perhaps early junior high, or before.
Where my mother would read something in a local newspaper and she'd say, oh, well, here's this Eagle Scout who went off and took LSD and then he killed his sister and now he's in a mental institution. What do you think of that? Oh, those drugs are terrible. They ought to shoot people or something. You can't help but agree with her, and then they'll walk off very satisfied and say, well, we've taught him. I mean, that's, you know, and then what he learns in school, that'll supplement that.
They're going to assume that you're involved in it if you're older than 12. And even so, you know what they're going to say, and they know what you're going to say, and it's just going to be a rerun.
Yeah, but like, take something like alcohol, and suppose they have drinks also. They can't say it's definitely wrong, because they do it.
Well, kids are almost always wrong as far as parents are concerned. A lot of times, my parents and I, you know, have fights over who's right and who's wrong, but it's not like they're totally blocking out the possibility that I'm right, because a lot of times I am, and they finally see it.
Well, my parents think that I'm too young to know anything. You know, if we get into an argument, I'm not old enough to be smart enough. You know, I don't have enough knowledge yet because I'm only 16.
Well, I think there's one point for the parents, because they have more experience, you know. A lot of the things they've lived through already, so they know what happens as a result of certain things. But, you know, which the experience is something that kids our own age do not have. And I feel that sometimes this really helps.
But I think a lot of times they really do know what's going on. You know, we're just, I don't know, we just don't want to go to them. And,
But you really don't want to go to them and tell them everything that happens because you don't really want to hurt them.
As far as you're concerned, it's considered funny. But your parents take it seriously, like it's the greatest tragedy of the world. Or else they don't take it seriously enough. Like, something to you could be really, really serious, and they'll just kind of brush it off as not that, you know, serious or anything.
Gonorrhea is a discharge, it means a discharge from the gonads, from the generative organs. It's a disease that causes pain and discomfort and discharge from the generative organs of people.
If something is very important to you and it's earth-shattering, parents are kind of afraid to accept it. And if you tell them something, they won't believe it, or they just pretend that you didn't say it, and they try not to believe it. And that's something, you know, if you tell a friend a very serious problem like that, and you tell them that you mean it, they're going to believe it and they're going to think about it, but parents are sometimes too scared of it.
I mean, your friends are objective, you know, they can, if you have some sort of problem, you can, you know, say, this is what's happening, and, you know, what do you think? With your parents, I mean, they're emotionally involved with you, like, you know, they're worried about your welfare.
In most cases with me, it depends on which kind of reaction that I feel like dealing with at the time. Whether I feel like, you know, having people shrieking and crying and screaming in the case of my mother, or whether I'd prefer to be greeted with just a stony stare from my father. So in most cases, I just avoid talking to them at all costs.
Like, if I told my mother in confidence, then she'd tell my father, because, I don't know, well, he's included in the confidence, according to her, but, so I don't really say anything really serious to either one of my parents, but not so serious things, I'll talk to my father, because my mother just carries on for hours on end about everything.
I think it would probably have to be my father, because he's less infected with this I'm the parent and you're the child type thing. And maybe it's because of his job. My mother used to be a teacher, and he got a different job. He can be more objective about things like that. My mother takes too much of a domineering role, and my father can really discuss things and listen to someone else's point of view and things like that. But in general, like Karen said, with a really serious problem, I wouldn't discuss it with either of them.
In the male, in the man, it's an infection of the front portion of the penis. The tube that lines the penis becomes inflamed, becomes very painful to pass urine, and there is a whitish drip at the end of the penis which indicates trouble. And in general, men go and get treatment because they're very uncomfortable.
As far as serious problems go, I don't think I can talk to either of them, but when it comes to something like, you know, schooling or college or something that's important to me but not a serious problem, I suppose I could talk to my father better because he seems to understand more.
With women, the situation is unfortunately quite different. Can we take a look at this chart? What this is actually is a female cut in half. And I'll just show you what we're talking about so that we can describe what happens in gonorrhea. Begin with, this is the outside, and this is the inside. This is the tube through which the penis passes. This is the womb. This is the tube and ovary. This is the tube through which the urine passes. This is the bladder. This is the rectum. This is the backbone. Now, in gonorrhea, the cells lining the tubes into which the penis enters in intercourse, the birth canal, if you will, the vagina, are of a type that the gonorrhea organism does not grow well on. So that in a woman, the organism sets up its infection here in the mouth of the womb. In a man, if you remember, the infection is different. It is in the canal here that through which urine passes. This also can occur in women. The organism also can and often does in women infect the area in the rectum. In later stages of gonorrhea, this infection in the mouth of the womb, which the woman feels not at all, this is not a sensitive area, she isn't aware that she's infected, can spread up through the womb, out into the tubes and ovaries, and cause severe permanent damage to these organs, these internal organs. And all this thing is inside, way deep inside. That's the problem with gonorrhea in the female. And also, it's very hard to treat because it is so far inside.
Hey, I'd say it would have to be both, because if it was a serious matter, the first one I talked to would drag the other one in anyway. But seeing as my father isn't home all that often, I usually wind up talking to my mother, but I don't find it any easier to talk to her than my father.
I wouldn't even begin to talk to my father. There's too much conflict, you know. He hasn't really accepted me as a girl, but like one of the guys, and so we just don't talk. And my mother's national pastime is worrying, so I don't talk to her either. She takes everything to heart, you know.
If the infection happens to hit this little passage where urine comes, there may be burning on urination, but there may not. If it just sets up in here or in here, only in late stages does she feel deep, severe pain. But early, nothing.
Well, I feel that I could talk a lot more with my mother because she tries to be more open and subjective to my problems, where my dad has a lot more set values and does not like to deviate at all from them. Set things about, sex, premarital sex is definitely out, or anything with drugs or smoking. Alcohol's a little different. They kind of half and half about that. But he's very, very strong against, like VD, he'd be totally against. He would he'd kick me out of the house or something. I would come up with something like that.
I think they'd probably throw me out or something.
Even just discussing it is it's a forbidden subject in our house. And it's the disease itself would get them, and the way I got it would just totally, they'd just go bananas, and that would just totally revolt them.
It would be too much of a shock. It wouldn't be VD itself. It would be how I got it.
When she gets what is called a tubo-ovarian abscess, a real big, severe infection in the tubes and ovaries, yes, there's pain then, but that's some weeks or months after infection. All that time, she has been very infectious from this infection here in the mouth of the womb, of which she had no indication or only a very slight discharge, which for many women is essentially normal.
The last thing I'd ever do is tell anybody in my house.
I think I'd like to go to my parents. I'd like to be able to share that kind of thing with them, but I think that not only would their opinion of me change, like just at that moment, but an overall opinion, like somehow, you know, in the future, like that was one thing that might lead to another, and their whole opinion of me would change.
When we spoke about the complexity of gonorrhea in the female, and female don't come to it, you have to get them in and tell them that they have been exposed to a male and therefore they probably have gonorrhea. If you're sure what you're dealing with, there are a number of drugs, but they vary, that are effective. One is a variety of kinds of penicillin, the other is of various types of mycin drugs. So these are potent antibiotics. They must be taken in proper quantities for proper length of time, and checks have to be made to be sure the cure was complete.
The first person, and probably the only person that I really talked to about it, once a test came up positive, would be my partner, and tell her, that she has it, and get us both, treated and dealt with.
I think the idea of the other party is very important. That's probably one of the first things that crossed my mind, because this kind of thing can travel in like a huge chain. It can involve any number of people.
I think I'd discuss it, first of all, with my brother, because I feel that, he's somebody that I know will keep everything confidential, but yet he knows enough that he'd be able to give me some good advice about it. And I'm sure I'd go and get it treated. And then maybe, later, like maybe a couple months later, then go and try and tell my mother, or maybe even both my parents, but I would never tell them before.
To the male, if the infection is allowed to go for too long, it causes scarring of that tube inside the penis. If that scarring in later life, as it often does, becomes severe, it causes interference with the passage of urine, a very extensive and damaging problem. It also may cause sterility in the male and chronic infection in the glands.
Number one, I wouldn't tell my parents at all, because that would totally, just wreck them. My mother would be absolutely repulsed. I think I would go tell my sister, and then she might say something like, go to a doctor, but I have like a death wish, about doctors. I'm just afraid of them, I haven't been to one in like 5 years, and nothing could make me go to one, so I'd probably just sit home and vegetate and wait till it, went away.
An ulcer, a sore, a so-called chancre, in a period of several weeks later, after that disappears, there is a rash on many parts of the body. There may be falling hair. This rash typically affects the palms and soles of the feet. Syphilis can affect every organ of the body in many, many different ways, so that one could talk for hours about the kinds of damage syphilis can cause. And syphilis causes its damage over a period of many, many years. The original sores and rashes go away, but later, severe damage to bone, to muscle, to kidney, to heart, to liver, to brain, all these things can occur severely.
I would definitely get it treated, and eventually I think I'd like to tell them, but I think it would have to be either several years later or when I'm in a more secure position to be able to say, well, do you remember when I was 16 years old and I got VD? And then they would be removed from it. They wouldn't have the immediate reaction. They'd, be able to say, well, I'm glad, it's all over with, but I wish you could have come, to me then.